On February 18, 2025, the Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, finally announced a rate cut. This is the first rate reduction since 2020, with the interest rate reduced from 4.35% to 4.1%. It sounds quite encouraging, doesn't it? However, to be honest, even after the rate cut, our financial pressure hasn't decreased significantly. Let's take a look at how much money the rate cut can save. For example, with a loan of 500,000 AUD at an interest rate of 6.26%, after a 25 basis point rate cut, the monthly repayment would decrease by 80 AUD. If the loan amount is 1 million AUD, the monthly repayment could decrease by 160 AUD. It might sound good with potential savings of 1,000 to 2,000 AUD per year. But here's the problem. Can these savings really stay in Australians' pockets? In reality, living costs in Australia have been rising faster than the rate cut can offset. Have you noticed how the prices of groceries and utility bills have been soaring recently? Even a head of lettuce or a bottle of milk is becoming more expensive. Gas prices, utilities, and municipal fees are all increasing. This isn't an illusion. Australians are genuinely becoming poorer. In the second quarter of 2024, Australia's population grew by 0.6%, but GDP per capita decreased by 0.4%. Which means that economic growth is being diluted by the increasing population. Income levels have fallen, and at the same time, household per capita spending has sharply decreased. Compared to the peak in December 2022, this has dropped by 2.4%. Many families are being forced to cut back on expenses, and even the household savings rate has dropped to 0.6%. What's even more frustrating is that the results of the rate cut have led to a significant rise in consumer confidence and property market prices, making housing affordability even worse. Why has the Australian government taken so many actions to boost the economy, yet Australians' living conditions are getting worse? What's the truth behind the rate cut in 2025? Are Australian investors worried? How can they effectively stay on top of the latest trends in the Australian property market? With notifications popping up non-stop and countless repetitive emails flooding in, it's hard to know which news is actually valuable for investors. The Investment team has prepared a monthly property market report, gathering all the news that affects Australia's property market, helping you stay on top of the market efficiently. If you'd like to subscribe, leave a comment and send an email saying subscribe to the property market report to marketing@rightkeyinvestment.com, or visit my website investwithalison.com and click on free report in the top right corner. Fill out your email information on the page and we will regularly send you the monthly report to help you quickly and effectively understand the market dynamics. The following content is purely my personal opinion and does not constitute any investment advice. First, let's take a look at the Australian economy. In recent years, Australia's economic growth has significantly slowed down. As of the ABS data for September 2024, Australia's GDP growth rate has fallen to 0.8%, a level close to the economic recession of 1991. This means that Australia's GDP growth rate is at its lowest level since 1992, except for the recession year and the pandemic. Although the GDP growth rate is low, does this mean Australia is in an economic recession? Let's refer to the most common definition of economic recession: 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. So, Australia isn't technically in a recession yet, but the weak growth is an undeniable reality. Apart from Australia's domestic economy, let's consider how global economic trends have impacted Australia. Global trends have further worsened Australia's local economy. Since Donald Trump successfully returned as US president in 2025, he signed a policy on February 10th to impose a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum. This decision has been a blow to Australia. Even though Australia exported 223,000 tons of steel and 83,000 tons of aluminum to the US in 2024, the US has not offered any special treatment. On February 13th, reports indicated that after a call between Trump and Australian Prime Minister, there might be consideration for an exemption from the tariffs. But as of the release of this video, there's no conclusion yet. As one of the world's most important iron ore exporters, Australia's economy is directly impacted by such international developments. Australia accounted for 56.4% of global iron ore exports in 2023, valued at $91 billion. The iron ore industry is a pillar of Australia's economy, and any impact on it would significantly worsen our economic difficulties. At this point, you might be wondering, is the Australian economy struggling? Doesn't the government provide subsidies or policies to stimulate the economy? The answer is yes. Facing a declining economy, the Australian government has invested heavily in various sectors. For example, in the 2024-2025 federal budget, it allocated 1.65 billion AUD for infrastructure, 3.5 billion AUD for small businesses and households, 3 billion AUD for drug subsidies, 6.2 billion AUD for housing, and similar large subsidies for other areas. You may have noticed that all the government subsidies and economic stimulus policies are measured in billions of dollars. This leads to the question, where does this money come from? In reality, the majority of the government's income comes from the pockets of Australians. 48.33% comes from personal income tax, 20% from corporate taxes, and 12% from goods and services tax. This is a typical example of the wool comes from the sheep. While the Australian government faces heavy economic pressure, it also needs to help people through tough times. The only option is to increase taxes, such as personal income tax, land tax, capital gains tax, and additional taxes on corporations. However, public satisfaction with the government is crucial, especially with elections around the corner. We believe the government won't frequently raise taxes, as long as the burden on ordinary citizens hasn't become overwhelming. In fact, the government has another strategy: lowering interest rates. By reducing borrowing costs, the government stimulates the economy, maintains market confidence, and drives consumption. If the government continues to raise taxes, it is certain to be ousted by the Liberal Party. That's why the four major banks predict that, aside from the first rate cut by the central bank in February, there will be at least one more rate cut before the end of the year. ANZ expects a further rate cut in August 2025, while CBA, NAB, and Westpac anticipate one cut every quarter, meaning that by the end of the year, the interest rate may drop to 3.35%. Although rate cuts reduce our monthly repayments and lower the cost of living, we must not forget that the first thing affected by a rate cut is the housing market and property prices. In fact, as soon as the rate cut was announced, we saw a surge in property inquiries, which continued into March. This is not difficult to understand. With the cash rate lowered, borrowing costs become cheaper, and regular people can now afford to buy property, which in turn stimulates demand in the real estate market. Property prices are determined by supply and demand. As we've mentioned before, the pace of construction in Australia is slow, and the supply of housing is severely insufficient. In this increasingly competitive market, property prices are often driven higher. Compared to the last few months of 2024, early February saw an increase in the clearance rates for each capital city. Melbourne experienced a surprising turnaround, with property prices rising by 0.7% in just 1 month, becoming the fastest-growing capital city. Sydney followed, with a monthly increase of 0.5%. This is just the beginning of the rate cuts, and they are expected to continue throughout this year. Property prices are likely to rise in 2025, leading to a hotter market and fiercer competition for home buyers and investors. As the cost of living, taxes, and property prices all rise, what about wages in Australia? According to ABS statistics for 2024, the annual average wage price index, WPI, increased by 2.9% to 3.9% in most states over the past year. However, in 2024, the average increase in property prices in Australia was 4.6%. If you are buying a home in Perth for personal use, the annual increase was 17.6%, while Brisbane saw a rise of 11.4%, and Adelaide rose by 13.5%. This means that the pressure of the cost of living on ordinary Australians is growing as prices, and the cost of living in Australia continue to rise, but our wages are lagging behind these increases. Although rate cuts may stimulate the economy, the interest savings we gain, combined with slow wage growth, do not improve the quality of life. So if we really want to improve our financial situation, it's crucial to diversify our sources of income. For example, you might consider using your spare time to take on a part-time job or develop a side business. This could include self-media, e-commerce, or skill training, among other things. These are all great options. If you don't have that much time, you could choose to invest in property in Australia. Housing is one of the most essential needs for people. When inflation rises in Australia, rental prices will also increase. Therefore, renting out property in Australia can be a great way to hedge against inflation. As the Australian property market continues to rise, property owners will pass the price increases on to tenants. In addition to rental income, there is also the potential for significant capital gains. For example, property in Perth rose by 17.6% in 2024. If you bought a property worth 700,000 AUD in Perth at the beginning of the year, assuming it increased at the same rate as the average growth in Perth, 17.6%, by the end of the year, you would have gained 123,200 AUD. Don't underestimate this 123,200 AUD increase. It's higher than the average annual salary in Australia. This shows that relying solely on physical labor and selling our time mindlessly isn't enough. If we keep doing that, we'll never catch up with inflation. Instead, we need to actively explore personal income opportunities and investments. This is the way to continue enjoying a comfortable life during times of high inflation. If you're interested in investing or have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below and interact with me. If you'd like to schedule a one-on-one consultation with me, you can reach out via WhatsApp or email, or visit my website investwithalison.com to book a time for a conversation. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.